space of his choice, and he chose his residence next to Dennis Pritt there at Gate D of State House. It's official. And this is fully furnished and paid by the government. He is entitled to 2 new cars of his choice that should be replaceable every 3 years with an engine capacity of at least 3,000 cc. Office of the 3rd retired president already has 33, so they have one more slot that they can ask for because they are the ones who supplied the list of the 33. And they are already deployed and earning salaries. And I wish to confirm that the office of the retired 3rd president has staffers very well paid, with some at higher job groups, the level of a principal secretary.
Barely 2 weeks ago, government spokesperson Isaac Mwaura outlined the benefits provided to former presidents, which the office of the retired 3rd head of state refutes.
While the picture painted by Mr. Mwaura of the government's commitment to support the office of the retired president in accordance to the law is the ideal situation, it saddens this office to inform the public that unfortunately that picture does not exist. And our worry as an office is a precedence that is being set by the government of the day. Their decision to blatantly ignore execution of the Presidential Act No. 11 of 2023 seems to open up a Pandora's box that will leave a retired head of state at the mercy of the government of the day.
And now a visible Cold War stemming from the 2022 succession politics seems to have played out today after former head of state Uhuru Kenyatta accused the government of denying his office a budget for 2 years, crippling its operations. Through his spokesperson, Kanza Dena Mararo, Kenyatta has cited frustrations and mistreatment from State House.
Katika juhudi zetu zote za kuweza kuwasiliana na ofisi ya State House ili kuweza kujua na kuelewa hali ni ipi na kwa nini mambo yanaendelea vile yalivyo, hatujaweza kupata mwelekeo wowote. Manaka kile waraka tunaoandika hatupati majibu, na majibu yanapokuja yanakuja na simu na huelewi ni ipi unachukua na ipi uchukui. Manake hupati simu moja, unapata simu zaidi ya moja ikiwa na mielekeo tofauti. Sisi kama ofisi hatujapenda kweli kuweza kuzungumza masuala haya kwenye mhadhara. Tumejaribu sana kadri ya uwezo wetu kuweza kuwasiliana na ofisi hii kupitia nyaraka na hata kujaribu kutafuta nafasi ya kuweza kuzungumza, lakini juhudi zetu zote zimegonga mwamba.
According to the Director of Communication, the government has only provided 28 million shillings out of the 655 million shillings allocated for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. These amounts covered allowances for domestic travel and facilitation of 2 trips, representing just 4.4% of the total budget. However, it did not include payment for salaries and medical insurance. For the financial year ending 2023-2024, the office of the former president has yet to access the allocated 503 million shillings, bringing the total of unmet funds to 1 billion shillings. Setting the record.
All right, and that's that report there by Bentura Kwamboka. It also spills over. It was making headlines on the dailies, on all the dailies this morning. At the top page of the People Daily, there says, "Just respect me," Uhuru tells Ruto. A look at the Standard, if you could put that up, says Uhuru turns to God in Ruto money fight. And a look at the Daily Nation says, where is Uhuru's 1.1 billion shilling funding? In studio with us for this conversation, we have former MP and former NAT Secretary General Wilson Sossion, also governance expert Reverend Mark Okuru Echakara, and political analyst Jackson Ngoime. Gentlemen, many thanks for staying on with us. Sossion, before we begin this conversation, very briefly, your thoughts as we wind up on the education conversation.
Yeah, in the education sector, I think Kenya is a country, we've taken education for the last 10 years through doldrums and confusion and periods of uncertainty. That is why when you talk about what chairs as teachers are doing, because of poor communication. TSC is a constitutional commission. It has county directors of education who should have convened meetings with these groups of teachers and explained in detail their policies. And so generally, we have poor communication strategy in terms of dealing with the teething issues. And then generally, in terms of governance of education, there is what you call quality supervision education must be supervised qualitatively. Even when you are rolling out a new curriculum, you must have monitoring and evaluation mechanism with feedback. If I may ask you, the media, what is the monitoring? Do you have a monitoring report for evaluation of rollout in grade 7, rollout in grade 8, so that data comes to the public and everyone does understand? So I think we have a general problem about quality supervision with collapse of Quality Assurance and Standards Office, which is provided in law to do this work. It's an instrument and it must be enabled. And also collapse of school audit system, which of course works together with quality assurance. That is why the questions about investment programs, what the money is doing. Because what is the value of the school funding program, the FPE, and looking at Kenya is one country that has committed a lot of money to education. It has made the threshold of UNESCO of at least 6% GDP and at least 14% of overall budget. So that then Kenya is doing over 6% of GDP and 28% of the overall budget.
Yeah,
at
and
least
the problem is that it's
enough.
not really reflecting
now
the quality
the question
of education.
is,
let's move on.
Supervision, quality,
All right.
supervision.
It is a conversation we'll have
And
in a
it
lot more
requires a lot.
detail.
Thank you.
But let's turn to the story making headlines on the dailies this morning. And the former President Uhuru Kenyatta is accusing the current administration of, among other things, frustrating him. Reverend Chakara, it's a concern that has been raised by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta before, and where the government, through the government spokesperson Isaac Mora, as we've seen there, come out and outline a raft of benefits that they have accorded to the office of the retired president. But he says none of that has really happened. And even just yesterday, those allegations were denied by State House. What are you making of this new twist of events?
You see, now it's an interesting situation that we find ourselves in as a nation. But from where I sit as a common citizen, what I would expect is that when the spokesperson of a third retired president comes to make a statement of such grave implications in the public media, I expected them to come with the official correspondences to say on this and this date, we wrote a letter to State House reminding them of this and requesting them for this, but there was no response. And this date, we wrote a follow-up letter, and there was no response. And then now the ball goes to the court of the State House, or whoever is responsible for taking care of a retired president, now to prove that indeed they did respond, and vice versa. But if we are just treated to statements, it becomes difficult. Of course, it is something that the Constitution does not envisage, or the law of the land does not envisage. And also I saw from the office of the government spokesperson in their reply to yesterday's statement, one of the things that they did say is that the retired president's office requested him to be domiciled at his personal property, you see, and the government is supposed to requisition office space for him. So it was a conflict of interest from where the government State House stands, that you want to be your own landlord, you want to be a tenant in your own property, and the government pays rent to you again. So that is conflicting. And also the fact that we have an existing government facility that was specifically bought with taxpayers' money as an official office for a retired president. I remember we have a very, very good facility at Nyari, which was requisitioned, that was used by our former president, retired president, Mwai Kibaki, until his demise, and it is vacant, and it is a very good facility. So for our third retired president to insist that he uses, the government requisitions another office, not just another office, but his own property, again, and pay rent to himself and is the tenant, that in itself also really, it's mischievous, if I may call it.
All right, Ngweba, let's hear your thoughts on this, because In that recent communication, the State House spokesperson Hussein Mohammed said that the former head of state was actually allocated a fully furnished office in Upmarket Nyari in Nairobi. Now, Kanze Dena addressed this office, and the statement there was that there was an office complex in Nyari that was used by the former president, Mwai Kibaki. It is very well known, according to the statement, and I'm reading verbatim, it is very well known that it is there and it is vacant, and that the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, can use it when he deems fit. But then Kanze Dena, in her statement, they said that that office was selected by the late President Mwai Kibaki as a suitable office space for himself. And so the third retired president, Uhuru Kenyatta, did not quite, did not quite like the office and decided to get offices within his private home. Is that argument solid, in your view, from State House? That, I mean, how would they start paying for a space within his own private homestead when there's already an office that is vacant, that can be used, and we're in the middle of austerity measures as a country? Does it make sense to you?
Poor communication strategy, once again, not on the part of the office of the president. What Reverend maybe missed is that the statement by the third retired president or the fourth president of the Republic of Kenya was a response. It was quite provoked. There was a statement, like you rightly put, by Hussein Mohammed, and then another official statement issued by the government spokesman, the Honorable Mwaura.
Right.
And I look at, you cannot look at this issue in isolation. There have been very serious efforts by this government to undermine the former president. There are serious issues that the government has done that greatly show that there is very little respect for the fourth president. And when I look at this, I can clearly see that with the issues that they're raising of tenancy, whether it is right to pay for a personal house, first and foremost, this thing comes under the ambit of retirement benefits. Retirement benefits is almost like a salary. If, for example, you live in your house, you're not forced to move to your house because you're being paid a house allowance. What they do is to give you house allowance and you continue in an occupied house. Besides, once again, poor communication strategy. Kanze Dena has clearly told us that they wrote a letter requesting this particular office to be used as the office. There was no official response. And this is very clear. The statement by the fourth president or the third retired president is an invitation to audit. I look at it as an invitation to audit because so far the office has been allocated in excess of 1 billion shillings. And yet we can hear them clearly saying, we have not received this money, and other than the salaries that have been paid. So this is an invitation to the controller of budgets to ask themselves one question: who exactly comes up with this budget? Because a budget originates from the user and then goes to the authority to incur expenditure and the person who presents the budget. Then this is also an invitation to EACC. Please come and check how this amount of money was used. This is also an invitation to the Auditor General. Please come and explain to us how this has been done. But all in all, there is clear provision in the Act that the office of the retired president gets to choose their office. Mwai Kibaki did, Daniel Moi did, also gets to choose the vehicles they use. All other former heads of states did that. So, and therefore, I think when Kanze comes and tells the whole nation, and in a response to Mwaura, that all our official communications have not been responded to, it is now upon Mwaura not to just come with some terse lampoon complaining on the media. It is up to Mwaura to explain to us in details why they do not honor the response, in dignified response, the office of the fourth president.
All right. One of the claims that Dena had is that they did not receive official communication, instead received communication in the form of texts and, verbal communication. But you see, the office of the retired president has actually been allocated 579 million shillings in the upcoming financial year. However, Kanze confirmed a few things, that there had been unceremonious withdrawal and intimidation of staff from the office of the retired president, including through phone calls at midnight, and also raised concerns about the government's refusal to renew her contract as the Director of Communication at the office of the retired president. Sosyon, outside of the audit, so to speak, that they're asking for, the accountability from government, these claims of intimidation of staff as late as midnight, refusal to renew contracts of staff of the retired president, does that point to intimidation by the government?
Well, those are allegations. We call them allegations, and it requires full proof, and I disagree with my honorable colleague here. If you look at the Presidential Benefit Act, and in fact, why did we choose to retire presidents in Kenya? Let's go back to that point. So that then presidents don't stick to power for long. They retire and they still work within their private time for the public and for the country at the cost of the state. So that then, when you are retired as a retired president, you are an institution of the public. And so trying to argue backwards and say Moi didn't have an office he operated from his Kabarak home, we don't need to say that was right. The first retired president to walk into retirement was President Moi. And now when you are renting a premise for a retired president, should we have officers of retired presidents domiciled in their own personal homes and paid as rent? That is wrong.
But remember, the allegation here is that there was lack of commitment to finalize on the issue of office space. Kanza details several things, including a text message from the then in charge of the retired president's office requiring about rent estimates for property that had been identified.
Let me come into that.
But there was no completion.
And even Kanza Dennis said the retired president himself at some point agreed and with the Attorney General and gave approval of certain things and even approved the home, which I think fundamentally is wrong. There is an act that guides how to treat a former retired president. An office is a right. The first retired president to acquire an office outside the residence was Mwai Kibaki, and it was bought by the state. And we now have only one living retired president in Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta. And we have only one office acquired and paid for by the government for retired presidents. So it goes without saying that government cannot put money anywhere else other than that particular office.
But he had no leeway to choose his own office. He had to take the office that had been given to the chosen, individually.
But you see, if we are now dealing the leeway of choosing, you don't choose your private residence, and it's against the procurement law.
Even the choice of his own office had been okayed, but it was the lack of commitment to finalize.
If you are telling Kenyans to follow the law,
estimates up to 22 million shillings given for an office space already
if you are telling Kenyans to follow the law and even to be prudent in following procurement laws, and you want to bully a government to violate procurement laws, I don't think that is right. And the government, and I think State House has communicated on how it wants things done. It looks like there are a lot of dirty things, and probably the office of the third retired president could be intending to bully government and to bully State House to do things that are outside the law. That should not be allowed.
Talk to us about this one thing then, because the former president's spokesperson says Parliament allocated 655 million shillings to the office of the retired president in the 2022-2023 financial year. Only 28 million shillings to date has been released. This is just about 4.4%.
We cannot verify
of the entire budget. So it's not just office space. It is fueling his cars, which he says he has done out of pocket, payrolling his employees.
Space where somebody is occupying his residence. Let us for once...
This is outside of the office space. There are several other things the president is entitled to.
Think straight and respect the rule of law as a country. The rule of law does not give exception to the sitting president and even to the retired president. So do you want us that in 2032 we begin paying William Ruto.
We are all about rule of law,
Sosion.
However, like you say, there is a process on how to treat former presidents. Why hasn't this money, 1.1 billion shillings over the last... No, Sosion, answer my question first. Why hasn't 1.1 billion shillings been allocated to the office of the retired president if we are so big about rule of law?
Let me say this, Michelle, because I'm not going into the details of how much money. It is all about how the retired president perceives the office of the retired president.
It's not perception. 600 million should have been sent.
It is wrong for any president when you retire. You make your own interpretations. You want your own way. It is wrong. It's not right. Let us dignify. Let's look at the American tradition.
What are you saying about this statement? Are you saying it was a misrepresentation? It was a lie? What are you saying about this statement?
No. I think the former office of the retired president is trying to bully the states to do things outside the law, which is not right.
Okay.
I think it has reached a time. Michelle, allow me. It has reached a time. Look at the U.S. The retired presidents are treated with dignity, and they also treat the government and the president in office with dignity. You can see presidential libraries, and they're operating with dignity.
Okay, well, we must take a break. I don't know, your thoughts. Who is bullying who?
The president that is being set here, and the body language of the former retired president, he has not even come out to recognize.
Okay, let's take a break. Let's just give him 30 seconds.
The sitting president.
Let me say this. I can see the heading of this particular conversation, sabotaging former President Uhuru. It's a question, sabotaging. And I think it is not possible for anyone to sabotage any retired person. If there is any person who can sabotage Uhuru's retirement, it is Uhuru himself. I want to say this. There is what we call the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. So if we are going just to stick to the letter and we don't want to read the spirit, then we are going to have problems. One, if we are going to set this precedent that now that we are, unlike in the past when we had very old presidents, now that we have young presidents, Ruto is going to retire in the next few years. He will be barely in his early 60s. You can imagine if every retired president gets to choose his office. Well,
if you have several retired presidents, they can't share an office.
Let me first finish. Let me first prosecute what I'm saying. We already
have 10 seconds.
We already have an office that exists, bought by tax. It was not rented, bought. So it's an existing facility for retired president. Though it was President Kibaki who chose it, it doesn't mean that it cannot be used. Now, if Uhuru gets to choose his own, say for example, and it is bought by taxpayers the way Kibaki chose his own, he is still alive. The Kibaki one is lying there idle. Uhuru passes on, his own remains idle. The coming president says, the law says, I must choose my own choice, my taste. We go and buy a third facility by taxpayers.
This is all property that can be sold.
What is the spirit of the law?
We must take a break, gentlemen. Let's take a very short break. We'll be back. I'll give you time to respond on this. Let's take a break. We'd also like to hear your views on this conversation. The hashtag is New Dawn. We'll be sampling them in the course of this broadcast.